Welcome, everybody, to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, today, live on June the 6th, to bring you guys another episode of the show. We have a good amount of stories to get to today around contract talks and certain players. So, to start off, we're going to be talking about the Colts center, Ryan Kelly, one of the representatives of the NFLPA for the Colts, coming out and really disputing the 18-game regular season, was very adamant in his points as to why this is not a good idea, so I'll get into that in just a few minutes. And also, the Packers came out and said that they would like to get an extension done for Jordan Love, ideally before training camp, to try and beat out some of the other quarterbacks trying to get an extension. We'll get into what their general manager said and what the whole situation is looking like there in Green Bay. Plus, Micah Parsons returned to the Cowboys practices officially this week. We'll get into why he gave some of the reasons that he did for missing the voluntary portion of the offseason and what this could mean for the Cowboys going forward based on his contract and all that sort of stuff going on over there in Dallas. That and much more on today's show, so make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And also, as a reminder, before I start, as always, if you have any questions or want to make any comment, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. By using this tip and donations link, I'll be able to see your question, read it on air, and that way get your guys' thoughts or perspective on anything I say or on any of the topics we discuss on today's show. It's a massive help for this show and the network, so please, if you would, use the tip and donations link, gsmcpodcast.net. But in saying that, we can get back to the first topic on today's agenda. The 18-game regular season gaining more and more traction as the offseason goes on. You had that proposal from the NFLPA to sort of switch up the offseason, which gained more traction for this 18-game regular season idea. And for the most part, I think people have been 50-50 on it. You've seen Derek Carr talk about the change to the offseason and then eventually the 18-game regular season. Brock Purdy mentioned it as well. He seemed, pretty even split on it as well. Nick Bosa was very much against it. And now Ryan Kelly came out in one of their minicamp practices this week and was very adamantly against this 18-game regular season. And if you don't know too much about Ryan Kelly, what he has to do with the NFLPA and this whole situation, he is the Pro Bowl center for the Indianapolis Colts and also the NFLPA representative for the Indianapolis Colts as well. So he spoke to the media on Wednesday about the potential about expanding this regular season. And one of the first points he made was just the basic, grit and tiredness and just wear and tear that comes from a football season, already upping it to 17 games and now wanting to expand it again to 18 games. That was really the first point he made in his stance on it so far. You could see it there on the screen. And he basically said, if people understood how hard it was to play 16, then they added another one, right? They get rid of preseason games. Well, okay. And who's that gonna hurt? The guys who don't have a shot, the undrafted guys or late round guys that need to go out there and improve themselves. And also went on to say further in his statement that the fans don't really know what goes on in an offseason for a football team. Really, they have the outside perspective and don't really get to see what some of these guys go through. See, these undrafted guys, these late round guys that don't really have too much of a shot to make it. Because of their stock, because of the low value at the beginning of it, they have a long shot at making these rosters, so they need even more time to sort of get acclimated to this whole situation of now being in the NFL and playing football professionally. And that was my biggest problem with the whole idea of expanding the 18-game season, getting rid of another preseason game. And if you change the offseason as well, you get rid of the OTA periods to sort of negotiate some more time off there to increase the schedule. You get more time off so then we can play another game. That's sort of the idea with this whole situation going on with the offseason changes leading into the 18-game regular season. But again, I don't think too many people really understand how important rookie minicamps are, OTAs, and these voluntary practices that are voluntary to most of the veteran guys because they really don't have much to lose. If you're a quarterback, if you're a 8-year veteran, an 8-year wide receiver, or just, someone of a leadership standpoint in a team, these situations, these opportunities don't really affect you as much because you already have a solidified spot on the team. And for these undrafted guys and even first rounders that get drafted second, third round, of course, even in the first round, yeah, they might be a little bit more safe than these late round guys, undrafted guys, but at the same time, they're also trying to get the hang of this NFL situation now that does become their life and takes over their entire life. So having that extra time there to really get acclimated really plays into how much they can contribute right away. A lot of teams benefit from the young guys coming in right away, a rookie quarterback having all of this extra time to come in, learn the system, and just practice it over and over again and make mistakes in practice is much more beneficial than going out there in the game, not being prepared, and making a lot of mistakes and growing that way in the games that matter a lot more than in the spring, of course. And that's really my biggest issue. That was what Ryan Kelly sort of led off with as well in his statement. But he went on to also say more on, how this whole situation came up, mentioning Roger Goodell there a little bit here in another statement he made. He basically said, yeah, 18 games sound great when Roger is saying it on the Pat McAfee podcast, but until you're the one going out there and putting a helmet on for 18 of those games, yeah, then come talk to me. And he makes a good point, obviously. A lot of people talk on these situations without maybe going out there and playing football, knowing what it's really like to go through the grind and wear and tear of an entire season. 16 games is already a lot on the body. Then they upped it to 17, and then obviously now trying to get it up to 18. Not a lot of people on the planet can really know what that is like going through that sort of season. And if you're lucky enough to play all 17, 18 games, that's going to get more and more, it's going to become more rare to see those players doing it because it's just a big toll on your body. And to give some more context, if you don't really know what Ryan Kelly is alluding to by mentioning Roger Goodell, the commissioner, he was on the Pat McAfee show around the draft time, and he basically answered a question on the idea of expanding the season, basically saying that his whole mindset around it is that he doesn't feel that there's too much of a need for the preseason. He would rather switch out one of the preseason games, almost devaluing it a little bit just because you're obviously not getting everyone's best shot. You're seeing a lot of guys go out there and trying to learn what it's like to be playing at this level. So from a fan standpoint, from an external standpoint, you would see why most people don't want to watch the preseason. They want to see the live action, more live football, and see all that excitement. But again, I don't think too many people consider how vital this period is for all these undrafted guys and these young players to get their mistakes out of the way, get them out in live action, and then once you get to the real games, then you sort of minimize the opportunity to see more rookie mistakes when you're practicing it all off season. And Roger Goodell alluded to the fact that taking away a preseason game would be something that they could go down the route of, and maybe adding another bye week and then pushing the NFL season back to that President's Day weekend, and then just generating more revenue for the NFL if there's no school or work tomorrow. That was the basis of his statement on the Pat McAfee show. Again, it sounds great, like Ryan Kelly says, but again, not too many players, I would think, are too excited or overly excited, especially the veteran players too, about playing more games, having more of a risk of maybe getting injured in an older situation if you're a player. Of course, you want to go out there and play as much football as you can. This period doesn't last too long in your career or just in your life, but at the same time, it just feels like this could be pushing it a little bit too much. And then you get into the idea of what the NFL is really willing to offer these players to determine how badly they want this to go up to 18 games. It seems inevitable to some extent because the NFL really ends up getting what they desire more often than not from the NFLPA or just from these negotiations. There always seems to be a compromise that favors their idea more so than the players, and I'll be interested to see what they sort of leverage and try to give up to these players to get them more on their side, because the decision will come down to a player vote, and already, the players already approved the last time they expanded the season to 17 games, so maybe if they offer the right thing, they could get it up again if, the offer is too good to pass up. I mentioned before the revenue split, maybe giving them a bigger piece of that money stack there could be something more enticing to some players, or more off time as well with the off season changes. Those all are going to be into the consideration for this whole topic as it just develops more and more into next offseason, I'm sure, as well. But for right now, Ryan Kelly has been one of the more adamant ones against this schedule. Everybody else has been pretty tame about it, but he really didn't seem to be a fan of it. And if he could be swayed, or maybe more people now speak out against it because they see Ryan Kelly doing it, all of that and the reaction to all of this will be something to monitor as we move on with the offseason. It's going to be one of the biggest stories going into next year and the years after that, because I mentioned in 2029, the ideal spot for the NFL to leverage a bigger schedule of games to the broadcasting and streaming companies, where they could opt out of their contract and use that as a ploy to earn more revenue because they have a bigger slate of games. Something to keep in mind, but again, that's a long way away. But for right now, we'll leave that topic there, and we're going to move on with the rest of the show. We're going to head into our first break, and when we return, we're going to talk about more contract talks with the Green Bay Packers and their quarterback, Jordan Love. Where do they stand on their contract negotiations, and what's the ideal timeline to sort of expect something to finally be finalized between Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers? Stick around to find out more on that topic when we return in just a few seconds.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Continuing on with the show and into our second segment, more talk about the quarterbacks and their extensions and who will be next in finally getting done and getting over that line to earn themselves another contract extension. Well, we'll focus in on Jordan Love for the time being. Jordan Love, obviously, last year became the starter, the quote-unquote the guy there in Green Bay, to finally have a full season as their quarterback one. After waiting 3 years to finally get this role, he played it out last year, and it didn't start off very well at all. There was a lot of doubts about him, and it didn't get to about mid-season when he really started to click and started to really turn the page, and you saw a little glimpse of the potential that this team could reach there in his first season. He ended the regular season throwing 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns, and having a 64% completion percentage in his first year to go along with 11 interceptions, which isn't the worst of ratios, touchdown to interception ratio at all for your first year as the guy. Made it to the divisional round in the playoffs and ended up losing that game to the eventual NFC champions, but he had a good win in the wild card, or the entire team did, the Green Bay Packers, when they traveled to Dallas and really just owned the Dallas Cowboys in their stadium. And then to play in the divisional round again on the road, they had a good chance of doing that to win in San Francisco against the 49ers, but it just seemed to come down to a rookie mistake, just that inexperience from Jordan Love there towards the end. Trying to be the hero and make a pretty improbable throw. He ends up throwing an interception, and that ends up being the game. But, up to that point, I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with Jordan Love and how he produced, and really exceeding expectations, because from the start in September to where he ended up in January, a lot of people would take that as the first real year for Jordan Love. But now, after a season like that, you start talking more business. What does he deserve? And with all the quarterback contract talks going on right now, it's a very adamant and very legitimate conversation now to have with Jordan Love, because this past year in 2023 was technically his last year on his rookie deal. And like most quarterbacks, the difference with Jordan Love and his contract was that last offseason around March, he signed a 1-year extension with the Green Bay Packers for 2023 to still be the last year on his rookie deal, but instead of that typical 5th-year option for all the first-round selections, he opted out and opted for this contract extension. He agreed to that with the Green Bay Packers, and this really benefited the Packers more so than Jordan Love, obviously now in hindsight, because agreeing to that 1-year extension instead of that 5th-year option, Jordan Love loses out on some money, just the matter of fact. With the extension, that 1-year extension, he earns $13.5 million guaranteed, which could go up to about $22 million, but he'd have to reach certain benchmarks this season, probably, I don't know, leading a category in a stat category potentially, or making it thus far, making it to the Super Bowl or something like that. Being an MVP conversation, some sort of things like that, I'm sure could raise it a little bit more. But for right now, he's guaranteed 13.5, and that compared to that 5th-year option would have been $20 million guaranteed on that 5th-year option. So the Packers are sort of getting a bargain right now with this extension that they agreed to with Jordan Love, and he definitely exceeded those limitations on that sort of contract. Definitely worth more than that $13.5 million based on what he did last year. So now, obviously, the pressure is sort of on the Packers to, base their decision now off of the one season where Jordan Love really played out of his mind, and now you have the possibility of finding your next franchise guy for the next 8 to 10 years, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity, obviously, because you're fortunate enough to transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and now it's seemingly Jordan Love. With the young talent you have around him, the Packers don't want to mess up this opportunity, and aren't really taking anything for granted, really, at this point. I think they've seen enough, which is odd because it sort of reminds me of the Tua Tagovailoa situation in his contract, and how people take different approaches to that situation compared to Jordan Love, and I wanted to touch on that in just a few seconds, but more so on this contract extension and how it's going so far. Green Bay Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst spoke on Tuesday to 97.3 The Game, the official radio station of all sports in Milwaukee, about where the two sides currently sit in their contract negotiations. And he basically, said, we're in those conversations right now. Both parties want the same thing, and we'd like to get this done before training camp for sure. And both parties want to get a contract extension done. That stability at that position really allows you to have some security with the way we built our team. And that last part was really interesting, but before I expand on that a little bit more, I wanted to mention that 9 different quarterbacks currently make over $95 million per year, which for me, if I'm Jordan Love, if I'm his agent or anybody discussing this deal, that's probably the absolute minimum right now for a guy putting up those numbers, like I mentioned, over 4,000 yards, over 30 touchdowns, 64% completion percentage. Not a lot of guys in the NFL can do that. You are very fortunate enough as the Green Bay Packers to find them late in the first round there and getting him to learn behind one of the most talented quarterbacks we've seen in NFL history, to now blossom into something that you could carry into and still develop into a better player for the next 8 to 10 years, I think will be massive. And going back to that last part, that stability at that position, the quarterback position, as Gutekunst said, it really allows you to have some security with the way we built our team. And that's really the most vital part of this statement by their general manager, because you think about Jordan Love, very young, I think still 25, 24 years old, and then you have the rest of the team that averages, at least on the offensive side, I think Josh Jacobs is no older than 27, 28. You have all your receivers who are, again, not much older than 24 years old. I think the oldest is Christian Watson at 24. Then you got a bunch of 22, 23-year-old guys in there that really, again, exceeded expectations in this offense last year. Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks as well. All these guys that maybe other teams didn't really know about or really didn't put too much emphasis on also grew a lot as players in their development alongside Jordan Love. And the best thing about that, exceeding these expectations, is that they come at a very cheap price right now for the Green Bay Packers. I mentioned it when when Justin Jefferson got his contract. Of all the 12 wide receivers that are on the Green Bay Packers roster currently, all of them cumulatively make $12 million altogether, and Justin Jefferson, one player, is making $35 million per year. So, again, a situation that you can't throw away right now, striking gold with all this young talent that you've really just drafted and developed very well. And really, that just adds more pressure to this situation with Jordan Love of trying to get a deal over the hump, the sooner the better, to really blossom this team and really take advantage of this opportunity that you have a very well put together team, very young, have great potential to not only win that division, but to really compete in the NFC with some of the best players, or some of the best teams, I should say, in the conference, like the 49ers, like the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles as well. I think the Packers could give all of those teams a run for their money, but you need that stability at the quarterback position, like Gutekunst said. And that's really the main reason I think this deal will get done before training camp. I would also agree with Gutekunst here, but it is worth noting also that back in May, Jordan Love was asked about the potential of playing this year on that $13.5 million price tag, and he said that he wasn't sure. He didn't know really if he was willing to play this year if no extension got done, and so far he hasn't been holding out. That statement doesn't leave you too confident in what that exactly means for your starting quarterback, but he has been present so far. He will be there most likely for mandatory minicamp, so you can't really predict if he's going to be there for training camp. The recent, actions that he has shown in the offseason will sort of assume that he will be there, but he could throw a wrench in the whole situation if he is starting to get impatient to not show up to training camp, and then that's really where this whole situation could turn on its head. But I expect the deal to get done, but the one topic that doesn't sit well with me a little bit is how this situation sort of compares to another quarterback looking for an extension in Tua Tagovailoa with the Miami Dolphins. Similar in the one way that both quarterbacks are coming off of the one very impressive year that they've had in the NFL. From Tua's side, most of his career has been in and out, dealing with injuries. The concussions obviously aren't a great thing, and just really not convincing too many people up until last year, where through the first 5 to 4 weeks, he was in legitimate MVP conversations. Now, 4 to 5 weeks into a season, I can see how that really doesn't hold too much weight, but he was performing very well to start the year and quarterbacked a team that I want to say had about 11 wins, 12 wins last season, and they didn't end the year particularly well. It didn't work out for them in the playoffs. Obviously, that is always going to stick with the Dolphins and Tua, but he had a great year last year stat-wise, and also similarly to Jordan Love. And I just think when you're talking about, or you hear people talk about these contract negotiations with Tua and with Jordan Love, it sounds very, very distinct when you're mentioning both of them, even though both are coming off their best years in the NFL and similar situations in terms of performance and production. But one guy is looked at, Jordan Love, as being just on the brink of being on the positive side of a great payday, just on the brink of really reaching his potential. More people seem confident that Jordan Love could go on to exceed expectations more and more, whereas with Tua, it seems like that one positive year like the one Jordan Love had, more people are still doubtful around that and aren't really too convinced with Tua up until this point. And I know playoff success does hold a big weight when you're talking about this amount of money, but it is similar a lot up to that playoff point. So to see the distinction in how people talk about the two quarterbacks and their contracts and how much each of them are worth, I think it's pretty interesting in how people evaluate quarterbacks. It seems to just change whenever you bring up a certain guy and how you really evaluate him, but that's just me. That's how I feel about it. I thought it was interesting now thinking about those two. And the main thing for the Packers now with just sticking to Jordan Love is to wrap this up before you get into those contract negotiations with Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence. Those two guys are right there also looking for a contract extension. So if you're the Packers, the limit right now stands at about $55 million. I don't think Jordan Love is going to get that, but you hope to get this done sooner rather than later, where maybe Dak gets over 50, maybe Trevor Lawrence gets over 50, and now Jordan Love is looking at them like, I made it further than both of them already in the playoffs. Why can't I get that amount of money? So if you work this out before those two get done, it benefits the Packers a lot more. They save more money, and you nail down your quarterback for the foreseeable future for 3 years, whatever the extension may be. Before these two other guys, you don't have that pressure on you anymore, and you could just focus on football in 2024. But in the meantime, that's where it stands right now, and that's where we'll leave this topic as we head into our second break of the show. And when we return, we're going to talk some more off-season situations, this time again with the Dallas Cowboys. Now that Micah Parsons has returned to practice, what sort of explanation did he give for not showing up thus far to the offseason, now making himself present at the mandatory mini camps for the Dallas Cowboys? He said some interesting stuff that I think you guys would want to hear, so stick around and keep listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the show, and back into now the third segment of our live show is the topic around Micah Parsons and why was he away for so long. The first part of the offseason was really spent with the Dallas Cowboys being asked all these questions as to why Micah Parsons isn't there. Does it have to do with his contract? Does he want that contract sooner than expected? It seems like we saw Micah Parsons a lot more traveling across to other places like Asia with all the football camps and trying to expand the game of football rather than in the Dallas Cowboys practice, literally, physically being there among his teammates. Once he returned this week to the mandatory part of minicamp and this offseason, he mentioned and made some points about what he was doing, how his offseason was going thus far, and, giving just an explanation as to why he didn't feel the need to show up yet up until this point. He opened up by saying, I think the more years you have, the more you understand that there's also, the business side to it, and I think that's what camp is for. I mean, there was a time where Aaron Donald didn't even go to camp, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year, and then went on to the playoffs as well. And he also stressed that right now, or before this mandatory minicamp part, it was voluntary up until this point. He didn't have to be there if he didn't, feel the need to be there. Also, as an undersized rusher, he made the point of saying that he really wanted to let his body heal this offseason and not rush back into it and really exert himself in a time where, again, it is voluntary, so he doesn't have to be there. But where I, sort of stood on the situation, I mentioned it before, and how Mike McCarthy's comments sort of played into this, mentioning to local media how the opportunity of Micah Parsons not being there, learning a new defensive system, was the biggest point of emphasis for me. And also, Mike McCarthy said it was an opportunity missed by Micah Parsons to not be there, even though he prefaced it by saying, that Micah seems pretty engaged, he seems to be in good shape, even if he's not physically there. He was doing some stuff on his own that he felt comfortable with, but again, the opportunity to be there around the teammates and everything like that, I think still is something to point out when you're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, always obviously still in the news, but with a topic like this, you bring in the contract negotiations of not just him, but also CeeDee Lamb playing on his last deal, Dak Prescott on his last contract as well, or his last year of his contract. It all sort of wraps up into this bigger situation than it might necessarily mean if Micah Parsons was already re-signed, if CeeDee Lamb was already re-signed, if Dak had some more years left on his contract. I think this wouldn't be such a pretty big topic in the offseason, but because like it is typically played out with these expiring contracts, it becomes a bigger point of emphasis in the offseason. And also, Micah Parsons went on, and I thought this was pretty interesting how the idea of not being there, not building that chemistry with some of the young players, with some of his maybe new teammates, and especially Mike Zimmer as well. That seems to be something that a lot of veteran players sort of harp on, to be there when you don't have to. Brandon Cooks, I know, talked about it. Tyler Smith also did a few weeks ago when they were asked about being there when they didn't have to. They brought up the point of building that camaraderie earlier, being those teachers to some of the younger players that might, value their advice more often than a coach's sometimes. And Micah Parsons sort of touched on that topic a little bit by saying, I think right now it's just more technique. It's a lot of walkthroughs right now. So for my position where I'm at, it's a lot of individual, and I can do a lot of individually workouts by myself or with my trainer. And again, it is a valid, reason for not being there. You're talking about a linebacker, a lineman, maybe other positions out there as well. You don't really get the necessary physicality from just walking through things. You're not allowed really to have too much physical contact up until this point as of yet, without the pads being on, with all the safety and health rules that are implemented by the NFL. So that's another point where you can sort of get by with that and sort of accept that explanation by Micah Parsons. He certainly earned the time to get his body right for everything that he does for the Dallas Cowboys. That really can't be argued, but at the same time, you go back to this point of Mike Zimmer coming in now, a new system now moving on from Dan Quinn, new players coming in there as well. You get a guy like Trayvon Diggs back, and sort of fitting these pieces all together. I think that Micah could have benefited the other players on his team by being there, and he had a quote that he mentioned on that topic specifically with Mike Zimmer and potentially being there or not, and how that relationship is sort of building up until this point. And he said on that topic, honestly, me and Zim have probably said total of 20 words together. He's a very quiet person. All I keep hearing from coaches is Zim likes it this way, like this. Well, I like it this way, so I can't wait to sit down with him, because that would be pretty cool to have that conversation, alluding to the fact that relationship probably still has to grow a little bit more, as he said. Not too much communication, dialogue, specifically with Mike Zimmer up to this point. And is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? A little bit of both, I would say. We're still early enough where it's not a devastating thing to have happen, but again, I would still sit easier if my best player on offense, or on defense, I should say, and just overall on the entire team, would sort of be in a more advanced spot in this offseason, learning the new defense and really trying to relay that to other guys, younger guys that might be trying to figure out other things by getting into the NFL and learning their routines and stuff like that. Micah Parsons, I'm not saying he can't get there, but at the same time, I would sit easier if he would have been there thus far. And now you get into the topic of the money. It always comes down to the business side. Where do the Cowboys stand in those contract talks with Micah Parsons? You have CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott right there as well. You have the most time still with Micah Parsons because he has 2 years left on his rookie deal, including the fifth-year option. So you're not against the clock right now trying to figure out a deal with him. He could probably end up being the most expensive one, potentially along with CeeDee Lamb, but I don't personally think they're going to try and get too close to the Justin Jefferson salary with CeeDee Lamb, in my opinion. I just don't think the Cowboys would relinquish that, knowing that Micah Parsons, his extension is coming up soon after that, with 2 years left on his rookie contract. So I think he would probably be the most expensive one out of him, Dak, and CeeDee. But he still has the most time, and the Cowboys can do a little bit of salary cap juggling and trying to figure out some more room there to grow their salary cap and try to find some way to get Micah Parsons paid accordingly for, again, everything that he has done for their defense. And he expects, honestly, to reset the entire market by being the highest paid non-quarterback when it's his turn to finally get paid. When he was asked about it, he was short and brief about it. He said, he definitely expects to be the highest paid non-quarterback. Didn't really hesitate about it. And on the topic of CD and Dak, he said, "I'm patient. Patience is a virtue. I'm waiting my turn. Let CD get whatever. Let Dak get whatever." And also predicted that he could see some of these deals for these high-impact players reaching close to that $40 million per year mark by the time he gets up to try and extend his contract. And I don't think he's too far off, honestly. Based on the money talk of this conversation he had with local media. Maybe not exactly what Dallas wants to hear, already being in salary cap trouble, trying to figure out these other contract negotiations to field a very competitive team. Maybe they don't like hearing that their star player wants to be the highest paid non-quarterback, and also talking about that $40 million mark. Might cause a little bit of panic over there for the Dallas Cowboys front office because they have to keep Micah. Not saying that they have to do whatever he says, but you almost get to that point with Micah and trying to please him to the best of your ability because he is that sort of player, that generational type of player. One of the best defensive pass rushers in the NFL. So trying to do that and work out that situation with him, you try to cater to some of the things he believes and some of the things he wants in this offseason. And, he is there for the mandatory part, so hopefully now he gets up to speed in that Mike Zimmer defense and can contribute as he more likely than not will this offseason, as he usually does. And again, I can mostly agree by staying up to date with what Micah Parsons said on what Mike Zimmer wants to do on defense is huge, because the bigger point in all this, I've harped on it before, is that I don't really think their offense is going to be as advertised this coming year. Compared to previous years, they've been a high-powered, high-scoring team with the uncertainty at the running backs, the wide receiver depth, and the offensive line as well. I don't see that offense really carrying their weight this year, so it just puts more of an emphasis on Micah Parsons to really lead that defense, because I think they're going to have to rely more on that defense to keep them in games rather than, just preserving their lead that they build up in the first 2 to 3 quarters. I think it's going to be more balanced and maybe leaning more towards the defensive side of the ball. So if Micah Parsons can get up to speed, there's really no issue here. Again, the voluntary part of the offseason is the only part he missed. Now getting into the real nitty-gritty part, hopefully he could take those steps to really engage and really start preparing like the regular season isn't that far away. So that's where that stands with Micah Parsons, sort of giving an explanation on where his headspace was at in missing the voluntary parts of it. Not a big deal, really, up to this point. Obviously, the bigger one is CeeDee Lamb, but we'll see if he turns up to the training camp portion, because up until this point, he has not been at mandatory minicamp. So we'll see how that develops, how Micah Parsons also develops in this new defense as the offseason continues. But in the meantime, we'll move on to the next segment and the next break. When we return, more wide receiver rankings, this time in the AFC South, to conclude the receiver groups, and also we'll talk about the Panthers' plans to renovate their stadium and how a lot of change could be coming for the Panthers, improving those facilities after Adam Thielen said they probably have the worst facilities in the NFL. So we'll get into those, more details on both of those topics when we return in a few seconds.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Moving on now to the AFC Conference and getting back into these receiver group rankings for this time the AFC South and how this stands so far with the last portion of our receiver group rankings concluding in the AFC South. Looking at the Colts, Titans, and Jacksonville Jaguars, and also the Houston Texans, there's a lot of newness and freshness in this division, so I had a good time trying to rank these receiver groups thus far in the AFC South. So without further ado, we'll get into number 4 who comes in last? That would be the Jacksonville Jaguars for me because of the uncertainty and the major loss of their best wide receiver last year, statistic-wise, Calvin Ridley. Not only did they lose Ridley, but he stays in the division and signs with the Tennessee Titans on an expensive price tag, but nonetheless, now you're going to have to play against them twice a year, and that's never a good thing. But they have a bunch of solid receivers now as options. They brought in Gabe Davis. They brought in Brian Thomas through the draft, and you have Evan Ingram, who had a great year last year. And also Christian Kirk, who finished the year injured last year. Having a full season with him can do nothing but positive things. But a lot of, I think, solid number 2 options as well. I don't think anyone out of the group there that I mentioned is really solidified himself as a wide receiver 1 at this point in their career. Christian Kirk has sort of been there, not too much reputation there to build off of. Brian Thomas, I think, can get there, but he is coming into the first year of the NFL, so to put that pressure on him, I don't think it's fair. And also Gabe Davis, not too much reputation there, reliability there to be that number 1 receiver, just based on what he did in Buffalo. Then also with Evan Ingram, nearly 1,000 yards last year, so he's probably on the highest trajectory right now in terms of what he did last year. A bit of more of a proven reputation than other teams, but at this point you sort of are teetering with the fact that you don't know what you're really going to get from them because you built such a good relationship last year with Calvin Ridley. Now that he departs, how this group is going to look in 2024 and who really steps up to try and build some balance alongside the running game, I think will be crucial for them. And also, if you're going to pay Trevor Lawrence, if you're going to allocate that much money to him, you want to have as good of options around him to sort of solidify and validate that contract to have Trevor Lawrence play to the best of his ability. But that is the number 4 spot for me where the Jaguars sit. And now, moving into the 3rd spot, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Again, similarly with them, with the Jacksonville Jaguars, there is a level of uncertainty surrounding them. The most reliable option is Michael Pittman, and that was huge for them to keep him this offseason and extend him. I think out of Pittman, Josh Downs there that you see on your screen, and A.D. Mitchell, and then comparing it to Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, and Evan Ingram, and even Gabe Davis, I think you would take Michael Pittman ahead of all of them currently based on the year that he had last year, really growing into his role, leading this wide receiver group, and also very, very young as well, all over this wide receiver group. I mentioned these 3 on your screen. Michael Pittman is the oldest one at 26 years old. Then you have Josh Downs coming off of his rookie year, 22 years old. A.D. Mitchell in his rookie year this season, going to be 21 years old or is 21. You have also Alec Pierce there as depth at that position. He's 24 years old as well. Now I think you just got a little bit more talented with A.D. Mitchell being drafted there in the 2nd round and finding a diamond there so late in the draft, or I say late, but late for the kind of talent that he is. To build this young core, I think is exciting. There's a lot of potential there. I think A.D. Mitchell could be a number 1 wide receiver in this league, but at the same time, you have to just see it play out. You have to see that transition over the course of this year and the rest of his career as well. But Michael Pittman coming off of his best year, his second 1,000-yard season of his career, his best too, without really a starting quarterback or the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts after they lost Anthony Richardson. You'd expect the production to go down a little bit, but Michael Pittman went above and beyond, and I think the Colts could really ride that momentum into this year where now hopefully you get a lot of the pieces back, everybody can stay healthy, and that way they could really be competitive, at least on the offensive side of the ball, with some of these other teams in this division. A lot of potential, and maybe, just maybe, the highest ceiling on some of these young receivers that they have available to them is proven, but I like what they're building there in Indianapolis. They just have to get the whole team playing on the same level. With that defense and missing some pieces, I think the wide receiver group can be one of the most exciting ones in the NFL this year. Then, with them being 3rd, obviously you get now to the 2nd spot on my tier list. The Tennessee Titans, very close to being my number one. Very close, because I've been very much a fan of seeing how Brian Callahan, their new head coach, has built this team from now Mike Vrabel, where he sort of built it up through the defense and running the ball and being this tough-minded team that just punches you in the mouth. Not to say that the Titans have gone softer or just have gotten away from that, but now I think they've gone more to a side of more talent, more skill, maybe more finesse, for a lack of a better terms, with this team. And the big three that you see there, I'm a big fan of. DeAndre Hopkins was out there basically by himself last year with a rookie quarterback, trying his best to keep this offense really productive and in rhythm. He recorded another 1,000-yard season, and you have to get some help around him, and that's exactly what they did. Maybe, for some people, too expensive of a price for Calvin Ridley, but he's only going to be 29, 30 years old, and he had another 1,000-yard season last year, was the best receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So now to have him on your team as the second option, I guess, not such a bad second option on your offense, can't hurt at all. And also you sign one of the best free agent wide receivers that were still left on the market up until this point, not only based on talent, but also because of that relationship that Tyler Boyd had with Brian Callahan during his time, or both of their times, in Cincinnati. You already have him pretty much up to speed as much as anybody else on this team. So that sort of knowledge of the offense, that comfortability in that offense, can not only help him, but also the rest of his teammates to try and bounce some ideas off of him. And you also still have some options other than these three. Treylon Burks, the trial's still out on him, I believe. He was a first-round receiver, has had trouble, getting used to the NFL, but the talent, I think, is still there. And will he have to work a little bit harder for that? Probably, but, you can't just give up hope on him just yet. And also, you have Okonkwo also at tight end. A nice option that you have there in terms of depth of this group, but it really comes down to Will Levis and how he plays. And with these sort of weapons, the talent and the ceiling is there to try and get over the hump and the down year that you had last year. They certainly are an exciting team to watch this year. I have high hopes for them, and that's why I have them as my number 2 ranked team in the AFC South, which means at number 1, obviously the only team left, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, making up the Houston Texans. The ability to form a big three at this position this offseason with Stephon Diggs being coming over from the Buffalo Bills, trading him to come over and really step into that role, I guess, as the number 1 wide receiver. And I only say I guess because Tank Dell is super talented. Nico Collins also just got paid this offseason because he put up wide receiver 1 numbers as well. So having these 3 guys as your main options, plus Dalton Schultz, who had a great relationship last year with C.J. Stroud, and not to mention C.J. Stroud, obviously, coming into his rookie year, having one of the better historical seasons as a rookie, taking this team to the divisional round of the playoffs, I think says a lot about him and how just in his first year he was able to do that. What's the rest of his career going to look like if he's only going to get better? And you surround him with pieces like this. It's hard to find a flaw in this offense, honestly, it truly is, because of these 3 guys that you see on your screen. Tank Dell was on the way to a 1,000-yard season as a rookie. Nico Collins achieved that with C.J. Stroud, and then you have Stephon Diggs, who produces nothing less than 1,000-yard receiving years, and also just the experience and knowledge you get from him as the veteran of that group is not only great for the offense as a whole, but for Tank Dell and Nico Collins to learn off of that. A great bit of business by the Houston Texans to get this deal done. And how it now all just transitions and how they gain chemistry and that rhythm to start the year, hopefully sooner rather than later, will be a big factor in how they really play out this entire year, because a lot of people have doubled their expectations now for the Texans. They expect them to not only win this division, but to be playing in late January in the AFC Championship game and those parts of the season. I think it's warranted now with the level of talent that they have. A lot of pressure now, definitely. More teams are going to be well prepared for them, but that's the sort of attention that you would want. It means you're doing things right, and the Texans have hit it out of the park this offseason, building a juggernaut of a team on offense, but that's why they're ranked number one. I'd love to know what you guys think of this list, of the order, and what other rankings maybe you want me to do. I have some ideas going forward, but that is my list. Leave your comments in the chat box or also in the comments section after the show goes off the air. But in the meantime, we're going to go to the last break of the show, and when we return, a bit of a conversation on the Carolina Panthers, not on the field but off of the field, and their plans to renovate their stadium, Bank of America Stadium down there in Charlotte. What is going into it? What new things are coming potentially for this new stadium? All of the details will be revealed in just a few moments when we return after this break. Back here now for the last segment of the show to get it away a little bit from the on-field stuff to some off-field topics around one of the teams in the NFC, the Carolina Panthers, and their incoming potential stadium renovations to their home, Bank of America Stadium, the home of the Panthers, obviously, and also where their MLS team plays, the Charlotte FC, also play their home games there, and a potential renovation could be in the works after they're partnering with Tepper Sports and Entertainment, which is a Charlotte-based holding company owned by David Tepper, who is also a hedge fund billionaire and also is the current controlling owner of the NFL's of the Carolina Panthers and the team's home stadium. Only one of four NFL stadium owners currently in the league, so they're partnering with this holding company there, also owned by the owner of their stadium, and the company, is also going to provide some much needed help to try and renovate this stadium to also not only improve it, but trying to keep it in Charlotte, where that's the main focus of the Panthers and everybody involved with this project. They wanted to keep it in Charlotte and trying to figure out the possibilities of doing that and also getting all the improvements that they wanted to. Tepper Sports and Entertainment is playing a big role in that from the financial side of things. The money responsibilities in these renovations are as followed. Really a fixed investment of $650 million from the city of Charlotte over the term of the deal with Tepper Sports and Entertainment. It won't require any new or increased taxes to the citizens there in Charlotte, so that's always a good thing. According to the press release, the upgrades will be funded by the existing hospitality and tourism tax resource that the city of Charlotte has as well. So they have that going, and also these are legally required. The hospitality and tourism tax resources, they're required by state to be spent on projects like these to support the city's tourism economy. So, this existing tax resource that the city of Charlotte has is part of the requirement by law to spend on projects like these. So that's a great thing for Charlotte to try and get these renovations done for the Carolina Panthers. And also, on the other side of it, a total investment of $688 million is coming from Tepper Sports and Entertainment, which obviously is a massive thing. It includes $117 million that is already invested before June of 2024. So that part was already invested by Tepper Sports and Entertainment, and also an estimated $571 million as well coming from Tepper Sports and Entertainment as part of this project and how much they're contributing to the renovations. $150 million towards the renovations plus the potential overages, and an estimated $421 million for the capital improvements. So 421 for the capital improvements plus the $150 million towards the renovation adds up to that $571 million donation contribution from Tepper Sports and Entertainment for a pretty big renovation to the Stadium of Bank of America for the Carolina Panthers. The Charlotte Council, the City Council, will discuss the upgrade proposal over the next few weeks and really putting the final stamp on getting the approval for this renovation and for the Panthers to really go through with this. Right now, it's just on the verge of it. And once they get the approval from the City Council, as expected, currently at this moment, I don't think that will be a problem for the Carolina Panthers, but they're just waiting on that final approval from the City Council to continue to call Charlotte their home. It has been the Charlotte or the Carolina Panthers home since 1996, and really how this is all playing out and the eventual goal statement from the Carolina Panthers to try and get this renovation done was to enhance the fan and player experience, modernize the infrastructure, and continue to deliver world-class sports and entertainment to Charlotte and the region for many years to come, and all while driving billions in economic impact for the city. So apart from just being an attraction to the city of Charlotte and for people to come watch the Carolina Panthers, it is a massive thing for the economy there in Charlotte to have an attraction that people just want to be at, want to spend a good time there other than just watching the Carolina Panthers play, because if we're being honest, them driving in the revenue, the amount of people to come to the stadium could be a little bit dicey just based on their recent reputation. But if they have a nice brand new stadium that people just love going to, it will not only help potentially on the field, but also off the field as well to bring that revenue to the Carolina Panthers, and also just talking about the improvements and what could be expected from these renovations. A park-like setting all around to the new stadium and how it will look. The exterior video boards are for watch parties, other viewing opportunities as well, with the massive video board that they're projecting to have all around the stadium. A new state-of-the-art sound system and scoreboard as well, and video board all throughout the stadium. Social areas with skyline views, expanded team store as well for all the fans to enjoy, and brand new seats installed all over the stadium to just improve the viewing experience for the fans. And lastly, an upgrade to just the safety and the facilities all over the stadium to sort of modernize the look and the style of how the current stadium, Bank of America Stadium, looks as of right now. And on this topic of the facilities and really improving those, it comes after I saw a comment made by Adam Thielen, obviously on the Carolina Panthers recently from last year, and he actually said that they might have the worst facilities in the NFL. Now, I haven't personally looked at how the facilities are as of right now in this moment, what the state of them are. I can't imagine they're too bad. To say that your own team has the worst facilities in the NFL is crazy to me. He didn't have any hesitation about it at all. He just said it. Of course, it's all based on perspective. What he feels is the worst could honestly not be that bad. Just in comparison to other facilities, it could be determined as the worst. But that's probably a main reason why the Carolina Panthers are trying to get this done sooner rather than later. They also obviously feel the same way as does Adam Thielen. He mentioned that it was the worst facilities in the NFL most likely, but also is on the positive side and is all for the team renovating their stadium. It could only bring good things for the players, for the fan experience there, because the Carolina Panthers find themselves in a spot right now where they're in that transition period. They're really in the mud of trying to make this team competitive once again. With Bryce Young, you're hoping he pans out. You bring in some more help on the offensive line and also on the skill-based end of things in Deontay Johnson, drafting a guy like Xavier Legette. Some more weapons to go along with Adam Thielen and to help Bryce Young a lot more because they're all still so young. Their head coach, Dave Canales, is also super young and coming from a situation with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. not too much experience there, calling plays, being the main guy as the head coach. So a lot of uncertainty there with the Panthers. Might not be the sort of attraction that brings people into the stadium. So now if you have these renovations coming in, you have the stadium looking nice, having it look impressive, brings more people in, and then almost adds a little bit more pressure to the Panthers to go out there and perform. If they're drawing crowds, they don't want to let them down. They want to put out their best foot forward. And honestly, I like what they're building. I like what they're trying to build there in Carolina, but for right now, it's still very much in the works, as is this renovation plan. I expect it to get done, but no timeline as to when it will be done. But it is exciting times, hopefully better times coming for the Carolina Panthers and that offense, and just the team in general, and also the city to enjoy their hometown sports yet again. It's been a while, so hopefully that gets settled there for the Carolina Panthers. But for right now, that'll do it for this episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I'd like to thank you guys all for tuning into this show once again. And also, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. And also follow us on other social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more of this network's content. If you want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel on YouTube for all the live shows that are recorded and posted on both channels, YouTube shorts that go live on there as well, and the individual segment videos. If you don't have time to watch an entire show back, you can go on there and tune in to specific topics discussed on each live show. As a reminder again, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and conversations around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for tuning in yet again, and I'm hoping to see you guys all back here again to wrap up the week tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn.